The quiet morning at Buckingham Palace. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as tourists began gathering for the daily changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd stood Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old insurance salesman from Ohio who had saved for 3 years to bring his family to London. His wife, Sarah, held their twin daughters' hands while Marcus fumbled with his new camera, trying to capture the perfect shot of the iconic red uniformed guards. The palace guards stood motionless in their traditional positions, their tall black bearskin hats creating an imposing silhouette against the morning light. These men, members of the elite household division, had undergone rigorous training to maintain their composure regardless of circumstances. Tourist antics were nothing new to them. They had endured everything from people making faces inches, from their noses to children trying to make them laugh. Marcus had been particularly excited about this moment. Back home in Columbus, he had bragged to his co-workers about his upcoming trip, promising to bring back amazing photos and stories. He had read online forums about the best spots to photograph the guards, and had even practiced with his camera for weeks. His enthusiasm was infectious, and other tourists around him began asking for photography tips. The guard closest to the gathering crowd was 23-year-old Private James Mitchell, who had been serving for 2 years. He had stood through rain, scorching, heat, and countless tourist interactions. His training had taught him to ignore distractions completely, focusing instead on his duty to protect the palace and maintain the dignity of his position. His rifle remained perfectly positioned, his expression unchanged despite the growing crowd's energy. Sarah Thompson noticed her husband's growing frustration with his camera settings. The morning light was tricky, and Marcus couldn't seem to get the exposure right. Their daughters, Emma and Sophie, were getting restless after standing in one spot for nearly 20 minutes. Other tourists pressed closer, everyone vying for the best angle, creating a thick wall of people around the guard's position. A street vendor nearby was selling hot tea and coffee to the waiting tourists. The aroma of Earl Grey mixed with the crisp London air, creating an atmosphere that felt quintessentially British to the visiting Americans. Marcus decided to buy tea for his family, thinking it would make a great photo opportunity, his daughters sipping English tea in front of a royal guard. As Marcus balanced the hot paper cups and his camera equipment, he noticed several other tourists trying to get reactions from the guards. One teenager was making exaggerated facial expressions, while an elderly man was telling jokes loudly, hoping to crack the stoic facade. The guard remained unmoved, his training evident in every fiber of his being. The crowd continued to swell as tour groups arrived. A Japanese photography club set up elaborate equipment, while a group of college students from Australia began singing softly, testing whether music might elicit a response. The atmosphere was festive, with everyone enjoying the spectacle of trying to break the legendary composure of the Queen's Guard. Marcus handed tea to his wife and daughters, keeping one cup for himself while managing his camera gear. The hot liquid steamed in the cool morning air, and he thought about how perfect this moment would be for their family photo album. He had no idea that within minutes, this ordinary tourist morning would transform into an international incident that would make headlines around the world. Private Mitchell maintained his position with the same dedication his predecessors had shown for centuries. He was aware of every sound, every movement in the crowd, but his training demanded absolute stillness. He had no way of knowing that the friendly American tourist with the camera was about to make a decision that would change both their lives, forever. The scene was set perfectly. Hundreds of tourists, cameras ready, the guard in position, and Marcus Thompson with a cup of hot tea in his hand, about to make the worst mistake of his vacation. The moment, everything changed. Marcus Thompson wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cool London morning. His camera had been malfunctioning for the past 10 minutes, and the perfect shot he had envisioned was slipping away. The tea in his left hand was growing cold while he struggled with his equipment, and his wife Sarah was giving him increasingly impatient looks as their daughters grew restless. "Daddy, can we go see the big horse now?" Emma tugged at his jacket, referring to the mounted guards they had spotted earlier. Marcus barely heard her, completely absorbed in his photography mission. He had spent considerable money on this camera specifically for their London trip, and it was failing him at the most crucial moment. Other tourists around him were successfully capturing photos and videos, making his frustration even more intense. A teenager with a simple phone camera was getting better shots than Marcus with his expensive equipment. The irony wasn't lost on him, but it only fueled his determination to get the perfect photograph. Private Mitchell remained in his ceremonial position, but his trained eye had been monitoring the American tourists' increasing agitation. Years of experience had taught guards to identify potentially problematic situations before they escalated. Marcus's body language showed classic signs of mounting frustration, rapid movements, heavy breathing, and aggressive handling of his equipment. The crowd around them had grown even denser as more tour buses arrived. A group of teenagers pushed closer, and Marcus found himself squeezed against the rope barrier that separated tourists from the guard's position. The hot tea sloshed in his cup as someone bumped his arm, and a few drops splashed onto his new shoes. "This is ridiculous," Marcus muttered, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. His wife approached, suggesting they move to a different location, but Marcus was determined to get his shot from this exact spot. He had researched the best angles online and wasn't about to compromise his carefully planned photograph. The Japanese photography enthusiasts nearby were using professional equipment with telephoto lenses, capturing crisp images from a respectful distance. Their organized approach highlighted Marcus's increasingly chaotic attempts to manage his camera, tea, and growing frustration simultaneously. A young British couple standing next to the Thompsons exchanged concerned glances as they watched Marcus's behavior become more erratic. The man quietly moved his girlfriend slightly away, sensing that the American tourist was approaching some kind of breaking point. Marcus's camera suddenly displayed an error message he had never seen before. In his desperation, he began pressing buttons randomly, hoping to restore function. The teacup trembled in his other hand as his movements became more frantic. Several tourists began recording with their phones, initially amused by his obvious struggle with technology. The palace guard remained perfectly still, but his peripheral vision tracked every movement. His training included scenarios involving agitated tourists, and he recognized the warning signs. However, protocol required him to maintain position unless directly threatened or ordered to respond. Sarah Thompson finally reached her limit with her husband's behavior. "Marcus, you're making a scene," she whispered urgently, glancing around at the staring tourists. The twins were now clinging to their mother, slightly frightened by their father's unusual agitation. The breaking point came when Marcus finally got his camera working, only to discover that his memory card was full. 3 years of saving, thousands of dollars spent on the trip, and now he couldn't capture the one photo he had dreamed of taking. His face reddened with embarrassment and anger as he realized dozens of strangers were watching his public meltdown. In that moment of complete frustration, Marcus looked at the motionless guard and felt an irrational surge of anger. Here was this person, supposedly so professional and unflappable, while Marcus himself was falling apart in front of everyone. The contrast made his embarrassment feel even more acute. Without conscious thought, acting purely on impulse and frustration, Marcus lifted his cup of tea. The liquid had cooled but was still warm enough to steam slightly in the morning air. Time seemed to slow as his arm drew back, and several nearby tourists realized what was about to happen. Private Mitchell saw the movement in his peripheral vision and tensed slightly, but his training demanded he wait for actual contact before responding. The next few seconds would transform a routine tourist morning into an international incident that would dominate news headlines and social media for days to come. The tea hits, The fan, the lukewarm Earl Grey tea, arced through the morning air in what felt like slow motion to the dozens of witnesses who saw it happen. Marcus Thompson's frustration had reached its peak, and in one impulsive moment, he hurled the contents of his paper cup directly at Private James Mitchell, soaking the guard's pristine red tunic and bearskin hat. The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps erupted from the crowd as tourists realized they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Camera phones appeared instantly, capturing every second of what would soon become a viral sensation. The tea dripped steadily from Private Mitchell's uniform, creating dark stains on the historic fabric. For exactly 3 seconds, Private Mitchell maintained his ceremonial position despite being drenched. His training kicked in as he processed the situation according to strict military protocol. When a member of the public commits an assault on a serving guard, immediate action is authorized and expected. With precision that demonstrated his elite training, Private Mitchell stepped forward and firmly grasped Marcus Thompson by the arm. "Sir, you are under arrest for assault on a member of Her Majesty's Guard," he announced in a clear, authoritative voice that carried across the suddenly silent courtyard. The transformation was remarkable. The same man who had stood motionless for over an hour suddenly became a focused law enforcement officer. His movements were controlled and professional as he secured Marcus, who seemed frozen in shock at what he had just done. Sarah Thompson screamed, "Marcus!" as her husband was detained. The twins began crying, not understanding why their father was in trouble with the soldier they had been admiring just moments before. The scene that had started as a family photo opportunity had turned into a nightmare. Other guards appeared with military efficiency, responding to their colleagues' situation without any apparent communication. They moved through the crowd with purpose, creating a secure perimeter around the incident while maintaining the dignity of their positions. Marcus finally found his voice, stammering apologies that seemed pathetic in the face of his actions. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. My camera wasn't working and I'm really sorry," he babbled as reality hit him. The tea stain on the guard's uniform seemed to grow larger in his vision, a physical reminder of his terrible decision. The crowd's mood shifted dramatically from amusement to shock to anger. British tourists began expressing their outrage loudly, with comments ranging from absolutely disgraceful to more colorful descriptions of Marcus's behavior. The American tourists in the group looked embarrassed, as if Marcus's actions reflected poorly on all of them. An elderly British gentleman pushed forward, pointing at Marcus with his walking stick. "That's our Queen's Guard, you disrespectful tourist! How dare you!" His voice carried the authority of someone who had likely served in the military himself, and his words resonated with many in the crowd. The Japanese photography group, who had been quietly documenting the morning ceremony, were now capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Their professional equipment caught details that phone cameras missed, creating a comprehensive visual record of the incident. Private Mitchell's wet uniform began attracting attention from palace security and metropolitan police officers who regularly patrolled the area. The incident was being treated with the seriousness that any assault on royal property deserved, regardless of the weapon being tea rather than something more dangerous. Marcus's expensive camera hung forgotten around, his neck as handcuffs were produced. The irony wasn't lost on observers that the man who had been so desperate to capture the perfect photograph was now the subject of dozens of cameras documenting his arrest. Sarah Thompson was crying now, trying to comfort her daughters while dealing with the reality that their dream vacation had become a legal nightmare. Other tourists offered sympathy and assistance, but there was little anyone could do to undo what had happened. The news spread through social media with lightning speed. Witnesses were already uploading videos and photos with hashtags like Chadar Teagate and Chadar Royal Guard Assault. Within minutes, the story was beginning to trend on Twitter and TikTok, transforming a personal moment of poor judgment into a global phenomenon. As Marcus was led away from the scene, He looked back at the stained guard uniform and realized his impulsive action would have consequences far beyond anything he could have imagined. The morning that was supposed to provide cherished family memories had instead created a scandal that would follow him for years to come. When the internet gets angry, within 30 minutes of Marcus Thompson's arrest, the first video appeared on TikTok with the caption, "American tourist attacks Royal Guard with tea." The footage, captured by 17-year-old Mia Chen from Singapore, showed the entire incident in crystal-clear detail. Her steady hands and good positioning made the video go viral almost instantly. The British tabloids picked up the story with the speed of hawks spotting prey. The Daily Mail's headlines screamed, "Yank tourists' tea tantrum," while the Sun went with, "Brutal attack on Queen's Guard." By noon, every major British newspaper had the story on their front page, complete with photos of Marcus being led away, in handcuffs. Social media exploded with outrage from people around the world. British users were particularly incensed, viewing the incident as an attack on their national symbols and traditions. Comments ranged from calls to ban Marcus from the UK permanently to demands for serious criminal charges. The hashtag Dawar Respect the Guard began trending globally within hours. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a holding cell at a metropolitan police station, finally understanding the magnitude of his impulsive action. The duty solicitor assigned to his case explained that assault charges in the UK were taken seriously, especially when they involved royal property and personnel. Marcus faced the possibility of significant fines, a criminal record, and immediate deportation. Sarah Thompson had been contacted by the American embassy, who were dealing with an increasing number of calls from international media outlets. Embassy staff explained that while they could provide consular assistance, they couldn't intervene in the legal process. Sarah found herself thrust into a nightmare scenario she never could have imagined when they planned their dream vacation. The hotel where the Thompson family was staying became a media circus. Reporters and camera crews crowded the lobby, hoping to interview Sarah or catch a glimpse of the twins. Hotel management was forced to provide alternative exits and increase security to protect their guests' privacy. Back at Buckingham Palace, Private Mitchell had changed into a clean uniform and returned to his duties. His colleagues treated the incident as part of the job, but palace officials were taking it much more seriously. Security protocols were being reviewed, and discussions began about increasing the distance between guards and tourists. The viral videos were being shared millions of times across all platforms. Reaction videos appeared on YouTube within hours, with British content creators expressing their anger and disappointment. American YouTubers found themselves in the uncomfortable position of condemning a fellow countryman's behavior while trying to defend their nation's reputation. Celebrity tweets began appearing, with many British personalities expressing their disgust at Marcus's actions. Even some American celebrities joined in, apologizing on behalf of American tourists and praising the professionalism of the British Guard. The story was becoming much larger than anyone involved had anticipated. International news networks picked up the story, with CNN, BBC, and Sky News all running segments on the incident. Cultural experts were brought in to discuss the significance of the Royal Guard and why Marcus's actions had sparked such widespread anger. The consensus was that tourists must respect local customs and institutions. Marcus's employer in Ohio received hundreds of angry phone calls and emails from people who had identified him online. The insurance company where he worked was forced to issue a statement distancing themselves from his actions and confirming that he was on personal leave. His job security became another casualty of his momentary lapse in judgment. The incident sparked broader discussions about tourist behavior and cultural respect. Travel bloggers wrote extensive pieces about appropriate conduct when visiting historical sites and monuments. The story became a cautionary tale about the importance of maintaining composure, especially when representing one's country abroad. Online detectives began digging into Marcus's background, finding his social media profiles and sharing embarrassing posts from years past. His family's privacy was completely destroyed as strangers analyzed every aspect of their lives. The internet's capacity for mob justice was on full display. Sarah Thompson, trapped in her hotel room with two confused and scared little girls, watched helplessly as her husband became one of the most hated tourists in internet history. The trip they had saved for and planned for years had turned into a nightmare that seemed to be spiraling further out of control with each passing hour. The story was far from over, and the full consequences of Marcus's impulsive action were still unfolding across newsrooms and social media platforms around the world. Marcus Thompson appeared in Westminster Magistrates Court at 9:30 a.m. the following morning, flanked by his solicitor and facing a courtroom packed with journalists. The case of Regina versus Thompson had attracted unprecedented media attention for what would normally be considered a minor assault charge. The magistrate, Mrs. Eleanor Harrison, had seen many tourist-related incidents in her 30-year career, but nothing quite like this. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. CCTV footage from multiple angles showed Marcus's deliberate action, while witness statements from dozens of tourists confirmed the unprovoked nature of the assault. Private Mitchell testified with military precision, describing the incident without emotion or editorialization. His professionalism in court only highlighted the contrast with Marcus's impulsive behavior. Marcus's defense team attempted to portray their client as a frustrated tourist who had made a terrible mistake. They emphasized his clean criminal record, his stable family life, and his genuine remorse for his actions. Character references from colleagues and friends in Ohio painted a picture of a normally reasonable man who had simply snapped under pressure. However, the prosecution argued that cultural frustration was no excuse for assaulting a serving member of the armed forces. They pointed out that thousands of tourists visited Buckingham Palace daily without resorting to such behavior, regardless of their personal difficulties or equipment malfunctions. Outside the courthouse, protests had formed on both sides. A group of British military veterans held signs reading, "Respect our guards," and "Tourists must learn respect." Counter-protesters, mainly American tourists, held signs saying, "Everyone makes mistakes," and "Forgiveness, not hatred." The scene was tense, with heavy police presence maintaining order. The magistrate's decision was swift and decisive. Marcus was found guilty of assault and fined $2,000 with an additional $500 in court costs. More significantly, he was banned from entering the UK for 5 years and ordered to write a formal letter of apology to Private Mitchell and the British people. The sentence was seen as relatively lenient, given the international attention the case had received. Social media reactions to the verdict were mixed. British users largely felt the punishment was too light, calling for a longer ban or more substantial fine. Many pointed out that $2,500 was probably less than Marcus had spent on his London vacation, making the financial penalty seem insignificant. American reactions were divided between those who felt Marcus had been made an example of and others who believed he deserved the consequences. The incident had sparked heated debates about American tourists' reputation abroad and whether Marcus's behavior was representative of broader cultural problems. Private Mitchell, speaking through a palace spokesperson, accepted Marcus's written apology graciously but noted that the incident had been traumatic for him personally. He emphasized that he held no personal grudge but hoped the case would deter similar behavior from future visitors. The Thompson family's ordeal was far from over, despite the court case's conclusion. Their story had been picked up by American media with mixed reactions from their home community. Some neighbors expressed sympathy for Sarah and the children, while others felt the family had embarrassed their town and country. Marcus's employer conducted an internal review and ultimately decided to terminate his employment, citing damage to the company's reputation and the distraction caused by media attention. The family's financial situation became precarious as Marcus struggled to find new work with his now notorious reputation. The viral videos continued circulating months after the incident, turning Marcus into an unwilling internet meme. His face became synonymous with tourist bad behavior, appearing in travel blogs and cultural sensitivity training materials. The phrase, "pulling a Thompson," entered internet slang as shorthand for tourist misconduct. Sarah Thompson filed for divorce 6 months later, citing the stress and financial hardship caused by her husband's actions. The incident had destroyed not only their vacation, but their entire family structure. The twins, now back in school in Ohio, faced teasing from classmates who had seen their father's viral moment. Marcus entered therapy to deal with his anger management issues and the depression that followed his public shaming. His therapist helped him understand that his reaction at Buckingham Palace was symptomatic of deeper problems with frustration, tolerance, and impulse control that had been building for years. The incident became a case study in business schools and cultural studies programs, examining how a single moment of poor judgment could have cascading consequences in the social media age. Marketing professors used it to illustrate the importance of reputation management and crisis communication. The broader implications of the Thompson case continued reverberating through tourism and cultural relations discussions, serving as a stark reminder that in the modern connected world, there are no truly private moments of poor judgment. 2 years after the infamous tea-throwing incident, Marcus Thompson sat in his small apartment in Cleveland, scrolling through job listings on his laptop. The move from Columbus had been necessary after local employers continued recognizing him from the viral videos. Even in Cleveland, his reputation preceded him, making employment searches increasingly difficult. The divorce from Sarah had been finalized 18 months earlier. She had remarried a kind man named David, who treated Emma and Sophie well, though the girls still struggled with their father's notoriety. School children could be cruel, and the twins had endured countless taunts about their crazy dad who attacked a soldier. Marcus had completed anger management courses and regular therapy sessions, finally understanding the deeper issues that led to his explosive moment at Buckingham Palace. His therapist helped him recognize patterns of building frustration and perfectionism that had plagued him throughout his adult life. The tea-throwing incident wasn't an isolated moment of madness, but the culmination of years of poorly managed stress. Private James Mitchell had been promoted to Lance Corporal and was now stationed in Cyprus, serving with distinction. He rarely spoke about the incident that made him briefly famous, preferring to focus on his military career. When asked by fellow soldiers, he simply noted that dealing with difficult tourists was part of the job, nothing more. The British press had long moved on to other stories, but the internet never forgets. Marcus's image still appeared regularly in articles about tourist behavior and cultural respect. Travel websites used his story as a cautionary tale, while comedy shows occasionally referenced the incident when discussing American stereotypes abroad. A documentary filmmaker had approached Marcus about telling his side of the story, offering a substantial fee for an in-depth interview. Marcus declined, knowing that any media attention would only refresh the public's memory and potentially harm his chances of rebuilding his life. He had learned the hard way that some stories are better left untold. The financial consequences continued plaguing the family. Marcus's new job as a night security guard paid less than half his previous insurance salary. He sent what child support he could manage to Sarah, but it wasn't enough to maintain the lifestyle the girls had known before the incident. Tourism experts still cited the Thompson case in conferences and training seminars. Hotels and travel agencies used the story to emphasize the importance of cultural sensitivity training for international visitors. The incident had genuinely improved awareness about respectful tourist behavior, though at a tremendous personal cost to Marcus and his family. Social media had developed new viral sensations and forgotten controversies, but Marcus's name still triggered recognition from people who remembered the story. Dating had become nearly impossible, as potential partners would often recognize him during conversation or discover his identity through online searches. The psychological impact extended beyond Marcus to his daughters. Emma had developed anxiety issues, while Sophie became withdrawn and suspicious of strangers. Both girls were receiving counseling to help them cope with their father's notoriety and their parents' divorce. The ripple effects of that single moment continued expanding through generations. Marcus had written countless letters to Private Mitchell over the years, though he never sent them. The formal court-ordered apology had felt insufficient given the magnitude of his actions and their consequences. He often wondered if the Guard had faced any lasting impact from the incident, or if military training had helped him move past it completely. The 5-year UK ban meant Marcus couldn't visit his brother, who had moved to London for work shortly after the incident. Family gatherings were complicated by Marcus's travel restrictions, adding another layer of isolation to his already difficult circumstances. In quieter moments, Marcus sometimes wondered what would have happened if his camera had worked properly that morning, or if he had simply walked away when his frustration peaked. The sliding doors of fate seemed particularly cruel, such a small technical problem leading to such enormous life consequences. Despite everything, Marcus had learned valuable lessons about impulse control, anger management, and the permanent nature of public mistakes in the digital age. He volunteered at a local community center, teaching photography to underprivileged children, finding some redemption in sharing his genuine passion for the art form. The story that began with a man seeking the perfect photograph had evolved into a cautionary tale about the dangers of losing control in public spaces. Marcus Thompson would forever be remembered not for his years of steady work or his love for his daughters, but for 30 seconds of poor judgment that changed multiple lives forever. As he closed his laptop after another unsuccessful job search, Marcus reflected on how one cup of tea had cost him everything he valued. The lesson was expensive, but perhaps others would learn from his mistake and think twice before letting frustration override common sense.